No one makes us orgasm, right? This is why
hmm
like the same technique doesn't always work.
Welcome back to Untethering Shame. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today we're diving into a complex and often overlooked intersection: shame, sex, and intimacy, but even more specifically, talking about these things through the lens of social justice and inclusion. Sexuality and intimacy are fundamental aspects of human experience, yet they're often shrouded in shame and stigma, particularly for marginalized communities. How do systems of oppression intersect with our understanding of sexuality? How do race, gender, class, and other identities influence how we navigate intimacy and pleasure? And most importantly, how can we reclaim our right to fulfilling shame-free sexual experiences? Joining us today is Dr. Catalina Lawson, a licensed psychologist with over 2 decades of experience helping individuals navigate the intricacies of relationships and intimacy. Dr. Catalina's unique approach integrates neuroscience, attachment theory, and Tantra to empower her clients to cultivate deeply fulfilling connections and reclaim their birthright to great sex and intimacy. Together, we'll explore the ways in which shame intersects with sexuality, the impact of social justice issues on our intimate lives, and practical strategies for dismantling shame and embracing pleasure. So sit back, open your mind, and let's untether shame from our sexual experiences. Dr. Catalina, I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited for our chat.
I know after we first met, I was just like vibrating the rest of the day. I was like, oh my goodness, I get very jazzed. That's why I started a podcast. I like having deep conversations. So if I started a podcast on shame, everyone kind of knew if you're coming on, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
But then there's like the people that you find and you're like, oh, we vibrate on a very similar frequency. And also, what I really like is when someone comes to the table where we can have such different trainings and perspectives and push each other in our thinking and noticing and get curious together.
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited because that's really what I think you do for people that are following you, working with you, just watching your presence on social media. You are excited about that curiosity piece. And I think truly believe that the more curious we can be and the more centered we are on asking those hard questions, the more work and change we can actually do individually, but also collectively.
Oh, 100%. And thanks for that. Like, I hope that that's what I'm exuding because that's definitely how I feel. And acknowledging with that curiosity comes expansion. But when we're putting this all through, particularly when it comes to sex, gosh, we have to feel so safe to be able to do that. And so the fact that we're able to have this conversation obviously is such a privilege. The fact that we're able to think about those things means that we have the capacity to have those thoughts,
Right.
And so I think when we talk about sex and shame, I'm super excited because to me, shame is I am. And it's at the core. It's the lens at which we view everything, and so much of that when we think about sex and intimacy, and again, I always discriminate between the two, because I do think intimacy can be emotional, psychological, intellectual, as well as physical. And sex is not just penetrative intercourse,
Right.
And so it's important to just start off with that. But then when we think about that, our body has to, juicy sex is when we surrender and when we get curious and we allow our bodies to be explored and our minds and our emotions. But man, do we have to be open to that. And the reality is I don't know about you, but I feel like there's been a collective anger, a collective frustration, a collective helplessness. You know, I do think, like, considering everything that's been happening, like, man, there was a collective depression over the holidays, and now it's lingering. It's carrying on, and that's the beauty of media right now. We are in the most informed age. And so our body has a tendency to either shut down, dissociate, because it's just too much. So, I'm a big believer that what happens in the bedroom is very much what happens out of the bedroom. When we feel safe out of the bedroom, and when we assert our needs, wants, and desires out of the bedroom, we'll do it in the bedroom. Yeah.
And so do you think that is that biggest piece, is that we have sort of become conditioned not to voice ourselves and to be afraid of that surrender because of what's on the other side of that, because we don't trust that we'd be safe if we do that.
Well, definitely. I mean, I think so much of life from birth, all of gender, all of the norms from birth literally are taught to us. This is how you should be. Reminding that, I mean, humans are social mammals. The number one thing we strive for is acceptance. And so much of this is should, that the idea of want, particularly when the majority of people are living in survival mode. Right now, all anybody's talking about is the economy, healthcare. And when you're talking about marginalized community, disabled individuals, LGBTQ, the global majority, like all of these things, those are realities upon birth. And you walk outside, that's the reality. The reality of this is my frustration when we talk so much about attachment theories and people putting them in people in these quadrants. It's as if we're in this bubble. Like, oh, just because you're anxiously attached, this is how you're going to react without knowledge. And then if you just say these, the whole red flags, green flags, and communication is key. We are communicating absolutely not just verbally. We're communicating in how much we actually engage in life.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the reality is that if the majority feels so unstable, and it is the majority right now. We have seen just in this last decade, so the wealth gap has changed so much that reality and that instability is, it's constantly going to keep your body in protective mode. And what is that? That's tense, that's closed. And you don't even have the capacity to talk about it. Right? Like, you've got other fish to fry. Capitalism depends on the majority believing they have to, not that they can. Particularly when we look at the history of monogamy and patriarchy and racism, all of that came with capitalism 500-600 years ago. Like, I mean, as all of this stuff was happening, these systems, and the problem is that literally one of the things I feel like we're all just kind of catching up to is how quickly I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but like in 2 to 3 generations, so much of our relating, of how we work, of how we educate, of how we take care of our bodies has dramatically shifted. Like that quickly. What are the metrics that we're considering? Because health disparities are still there, and those are actually getting worse. And with urbanization, that's the model across the entire world. That with urbanization, health gets worse. And again, when we think about sex and intimacy, at the core of it is connection. And so when we layer in all of this pressure, I really do believe it shifts our choice. It shifts this idea. We talk about consent. So much of when I think about like BDSM and sex positivity, there is a consent. And that is so core to it. And I also think it's really important that to acknowledge that inherent in this, it's not as if we're impervious to these systems, to sexism and power differentials and all of those things. That yes, you can play with it, and that's what's cool with like BDSM. But it's also it's really you have to really actually be able to hold that. And so much of what I love about sex positive communities is that it very much highlights the centrality of sex to our overall well-being. And I think the reason I focus on sex is because it is a central indicator. My research and other research has really shown how sexual satisfaction, which is not correlated to frequency, is an indicator of overall well-being, physical, mental, relational well-being. And it's such an efficient marker for thinking about, for just checking in and seeing how sexually satisfied are you? Yeah. Again, and it does not matter. Asexuals can be incredibly sexually satisfied. It is how we feel connected to our body. How do we actually live aligned to our needs, wants, and desires? And And I feel like there's the beautiful thing with mental health right now is that people are starting to get a vernacular. And it's also appreciating that knowing, doing, and being are three different things, right? We can speak the words, we can say all of these things, but the reality is it is such an ongoing practice because we are changing every day, our body's changing, the world around us is changing. So to assume that our sexuality and our desires would stay the same, I mean, this is a lot of why sex does get vanilla and boring and then eventually withdrawn. This is because we need that security, we need that comfort, and we need that novelty.
Yeah.
You know, our body craves both, and it's being able to hold both.
I know the reason that sex and intimacy has been a problem for me before. It has nothing to do with the safety, security, my ability to communicate with my husband, my chosen partner, or with myself. Any sort of intimacy with myself or sexual connection to myself. My problem stems from I am on the shame train of hustle and doing and believing that my worth and value is dependent on me constantly having some certain level of status. So no fucking way am I going to take 20 minutes at the end of the day just to be with my emotions or to be with or to like go have sex with my husband. Are you kidding me? There's 16 more things I could do on my to-do list that are all hooking me back into those systems that say I have to do this to be worthy. And so that is that piece of, I know it's not true. I have not and I've tried the doing, I dabble in the doing, but the embodiment, the being in that, I'm still in those systems that are perpetuating those ideas. And I'm equally in the same place as that company that wasn't really willing to put the work in to make the change. It's just in a different space.
There's a whole spectrum of consciousness, right? I mean, I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, there's reasons why like monks are way up in the mountains, totally secluded, and then even silent there, because the amount of chatter, our experience is so much based on our perceptions.
Right.
And so much of when we talk about processing our emotions, it is building up the tolerance to feel those emotions. And all emotions are physiological reactions of memories from the past, right? And when we talk about the embodiment, I very much see it as an inclusion of those wounds, because again, the shame we learned it along the way. We made choices aligned to the shame that are, again, it's just the lens in which we live. For me, so much of my rejection wound was anything. If you did not believe 100% align with me in anything, in me wanting my coffee this way, or me wanting to do my this type of research or whatever it was, and then particularly like in intimate relationships where it's going to be even heightened our expectations or our sense of vulnerability, right? But if you weren't 100% aligned with me, you were against me.
Oh, interesting.
Period. The whole idea of, you know, I'm so averse to when people say, oh, just let it go, or you know, and it's like, and even the moving through, to me, it is, when I think very visual. When I think about these parts of us, it is very much including it, nurturing it, embracing it, and saying, hey, you just don't need to work so hard, that part. That protective part doesn't need to work so hard. And so that part that's have to. And again, and now when we do talk about sex, that, God, the number of feminists, women in particular, women feminists who still can be incredibly independent, really ambitious, and still feel the pressure of, particularly if there's been any sexual pain, of not having desire, how much they are pathologized for not being a good partner. I mean, this is predominantly in heterosexual cis relationships, you know? That in that one area, like, you can be a powerhouse in so many ways, and yet there, you know, so like when I work with women with sexual pain, I'll say to them, and they'll pull away, because again, mismatched desire is the number one reason people come to therapy, couples therapy, And it generally is the person with the lower desire is pathologized. I have a problem. They feel really guilty, particularly if they are in a loving relationship. They feel so guilty. And the number one thing, as I say, is, so they have pain. They try, but then they just can't take it anymore.
When I first started my therapeutic career, no one ever talked about sex in my master's training. Never. Not once. We didn't talk about sex at all. And then I specialized in eating disorders. And I was like, we should probably be talking about the body a bit more. Like, we should be having more conversations around not just body image, but the fact that like all these systems we're talking about in multicultural awareness, and yet we're not talking about the body and what their body is housing, but also their ability to feel safe in their body has been completely affected.
Totally.
And I still think I'm very new to understanding all of this, because I think there's so much I can't fully understand or empathize with, just based on, like you said, my perception of the world is going to be skewed. But it became very clear to me that I learned how to perform even with all those levels of privilege. I don't know how much you do with internal family systems work, but I thought about that as soon as you mentioned 100%. The parts piece is
Absolutely.
Like, that's the part I've learned how to integrate. Is there will always be, especially if we're talking about someone that's existed in a system that has been designed to make them feel like they are constantly the problem and they are in a place of threat. That part can't go away. It's not going to. Instead, it's learning how to have that part be celebrated, nurtured, have compassion for it, and really develop ways where it doesn't have to be on duty 24/7. And that is the very tricky part to imagine doing, and then to ask somebody to do it in a place like physical or sexual intimacy, which is the thing that we've all been taught we should have shame around, regardless of who we are, where we've been at in the world.
Like, I believe, like, if you have the capacity and resources, act, get other people on your back, and move forward. Challenge these systems. You know, we have to. You know, so much of it's sad, the rhetoric, the expectation of people to have children, and and again, so much of people don't appreciate like the racism within that. You know, I mean, sexual racism is very real. As an Asian who was hypersexualized my whole life, like there's all these layers, and it's also appreciating the privilege I have for that, the power I have by being sexualized too. Like, I'm gonna get attention. And it's figuring out, okay, again, everything has its serves and limits, unfortunately. And it's figuring out, okay, how am I going to exist within this? It's insane that as information, as awareness on all levels, information, awareness of what we actually can do with our bodies, neuroscience, all of these things, as that's expanding, the systems are actually saying, hold on a second. Again, because capitalism has to have the majority oppressed. In our lifetime, Africa, the most resourced continent in the world, cannot thrive. Knowing that is the reality. So much of what I get frustrated with is that so much when we think about mental health and all of these things, and when we talk about shame and we talk about all of the things that are trending right now, they're so individualistic. And we just, gosh, I wish. And hey, great for you that you can have that privilege. And so this is that that honoring of knowing, yes, I want everyone to get to the place of where they can feel
right,
and they gain control of their needs, wants, and desires, while also appreciating that is highly privileged, highly individualistic.
Right.
You know?
Well, I was just going to say, I think what you just hit on that's really interesting too is, you know, we saw this a lot kind of early in the pandemic when there was a lot more conversation around white fragility or sort of privileged fragility and that sort of element. One of the things that I think a lot about too is sort of the overlap of those cultural norms we've created where shame has become so I am the problem. It's very ego driven, and that I get it. It's still a negative ego view, but it's very much like my ego is so afraid that I am not going to be a part of the system, that everything is about me. I'm the hero, victim, and villain in every situation. And so we can't receive information from that place to then be able to recognize, by somebody pointing out you have privilege, they're not shitting on you or the people that don't. They're just acknowledging a neutral fact in the room, which is that your experiences are different than this other person with a different identity, because the system is designed a way that you are both participating in. And that inability to let go of that hero, victim, villain triangle, I think makes it so that acknowledging that privilege, to then take it deeper to recognizing what collective healing can mean, and then taking it even deeper to say, and this is why sex continues to be a fucking problem, because we're all either harboring our privilege, shame, and guilt, or we're trying to deal with absorbing other people's privileged shame and guilt while trying to deal with our own fucked up realities about ourselves. That's overwhelming. And so that feels like, as you were talking about, like, that's sort of, to me, how the dots are connecting and why we need to break out of that dynamic of sort of decentering ourselves, but also taking ownership of the control and the power that we do have to be a part of those conversations, but not from that place of I'm the problem or I'm the hero. Yeah.
Well, and again, so much of that centering, it's a threat response.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Like, and so much of like DEI and anti-DEI initiatives right now. Like, welcome to the world of the global majority, right? Like, are you feeling as if your privilege is being threatened, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what that is. Like, and so it's like inherent in all of this, at the core of connection is our bodies are either protective or connective. I've experienced energetic orgasms. So, you know, I've had a couple features about me, like, you know, they've called me like untouchable or the sensual psychologist and all of these things. And it's cool. And with that is obviously lots of pleasure. Like, I can have orgasms when I want.
Yeah.
The number one thing though, and this is what I think the beauty of our sexual energy is that I have a knowing that I have that power, that in any moment I get to determine my experience. And particularly the really shitty moments. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm having a like PTSD flashback and then I'm just gonna have orgasms. It's not that. It's the knowing that I have that resource. Because so much of when we think about stress is it's just a reaction to if I feel like I can't, if my brain doesn't think I can. And so much of when we think about our sexuality and asserting at our most deepest vulnerable, taking the chances of complete rejection and detaching from that, to actually allow to explore ourselves of what really does bring us pleasure. To me, that is such a place of power and knowing. No one makes us orgasm, right? This is why like the same technique doesn't always work, you know? Right. We wish it did, but obviously it doesn't. And so it very much is it's our orgasm to have. Yeah. It's our ride. It's our journey. Our partners are kindling, just like toys, you know, and it's beautiful and it's great and it can be expansive together. And ultimately, again, reciprocity is a giving and receiving. And it's the receiving that majority, women and men, more for women because we've been socialized. But if you can't receive, you're not in reciprocity. And it's from reciprocity that we expand. Right. You know, like that's the thing.
If I even bring up the conversation about sex, I mean, the first time I started asking about sex with clients in the room, the faces that I would get, like I was uncomfortable because I grew up raised by my mom who has no boundaries and does not understand that there are things you shouldn't talk about with that, in the sense of I'm not your friend. And she didn't ever quite understand that. So I never quite learned about my body in that way, but it was too much. And then I was raised by my grandma who was like, well, you can't wear white on your wedding day if you've had any sexual experience before. So like two very different perspectives, neither one ever talking about my body as an extension of myself and a way to connect either with myself or with other people. Yeah. So as I'm asking someone about sex, like I'm getting hot, like even us having this conversation, I am sweating in my right armpit, which is where I never sweat in my left, but my right when it's an uncomfortable topic. And I would feel it, but their faces, it was almost like I just said the most, like I did like a Trump tweet is basically what their reaction would be. And it would be like so overwhelmed. And you could just see that pain of like, oh, this has been such a secret, such a thing that you feel like you don't even have the right to talk about. Yeah. And I don't know where to go with it yet because I'm still figuring out how to say sex without stammering over the word in the therapy room. Like it was such an interesting experience. So now going back to what you said and thinking about that, I'm thinking, yeah, so then even somebody knowing, like the fact that you can have that conversation with your family is so powerful. Most adults, I feel like, wouldn't even be able to sit in that conversation without having every avoidance strategy and resistance strategy come up. Like, I can't talk to another person about pleasure. I can't talk to another person about if that's allowed. Like, that's not even, am I not allowed? But I have taken that so far off the table from being something I can even talk about with myself or think about myself. I could never open the door to that. And I think I don't know what your opinion is, but to me, that fear of even embracing that as a part of ourselves equal to all the other elements is also what keeps a lot of the conversations we need to have about oppressive systems off the table.
100%. Like, again, so much of this is that's where the detachment comes. Like, that's the cool thing about sex is that, like, I do kind of sometimes think it's like the kinkiest ones or the quietest ones, you know? and so, like, but when you just acknowledge it, like, man, does that automatically open up the door? You know? I mean...
And it does get easier. I mean, it's the same. I was just as uncomfortable asking somebody if they wanted to kill themselves in the therapy room as I was talking about sex. Once I made both of those things accessible, because your fear is you're going to screw it up. You're going to get it wrong. Again, you're centering yourself as you have to know exactly what to say. And it's either your problem to fix or your solution to present. That's not our job. Our job is to create the safety for people to explore themselves, to figure out what that looks like, to reconnect to themselves. So the more you do it, like now I can talk about it all day. I still sweat in my armpit. That's that part of myself that's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. But now it's not driving the bus. It's sitting on the sidelines, just causing a little sweat, but it's not stopping me. And so then once I could do that, then it was easier for me to explore, what's my story? How am I getting in my own way? And then I could go even bigger and go, how does this connect to the way that I'm not showing up fully and asking questions for other people? Because I never liked, like when you talk about, certain platforms, getting rid of political conversations, doing that. I don't love the idea of people hurting each other. And I think that's what a lot of people, where they say, well, yeah, that makes sense, because we're looking at those people that do that. Yeah. That they're so wounded that that's the only way they know how to respond. But what we're taking away is the opportunity for somebody that maybe is, let's say, that Christian fundamentalist that you could have a conversation with, they might not change any of their views or thoughts or opinions, but maybe they can expand their view to understand not everybody thinks like them. That's important too.
Well, and do not get it twisted. It is acknowledging, like, that, particularly when we're talking about sex, that it just as much as I want someone to honor my perception of sexuality, I better fucking appreciate a Christian fundamentalist. I think the one part where you were saying is it's that projection of judgment. Like, this is the thing, when it comes to this, particularly when it comes to sex, it's my fucking body. Unless you're attached to it, unless you are like in it, like, and I am actually allowing you access, motherfucker, it's none of your business. Yeah. Like, that's the difference of all of these stupid laws. And like, that's the part is when people are imposing that. Yeah. The reality is so many people are entrenched in just living their life and trying to get by. Kind of, we keep circling back, but ultimately that's it. And and inherent in those beliefs is a community of whatever sorts it is. But I do think that right now, and then this is the thing, what I also appreciate is that all of the people who talk and all of the people who criticize, and particularly on social media, like, it's great. You know what? That's where they feel their power, because the reality is it's not coming out in your votes. You know, like, we know that voting actually we don't have much power with that anymore.
Right.
Either, you know, like, right. I mean, but what's so interesting is that, like, we still feed these systems, and this is where the discipline has to come in. Is that, like, we can talk about capitalism, we can talk about all of those things. Man, you get ready for the sacrifice. You know, I want to have more conscious sex parties without all the woo-woo, you know, and I think that that's the thing. Like, even I go to a lot of sex positive spaces, and I do feel like there's this lack of consciousness, you know, and I'm not even saying it from a judgment perspective, but from how I relate within it, you know, because I do think that there can be a lot of and I think a lot of people gain a lot of pleasure from the performative nature, you know, of it. And I think that that's beautiful, you know, and I think that that can be celebrated. But I do think that with sex, so much is focused on the doing of touching people this way and having orgasms this way. And again, yes, orgasming is a skill, like, it is something. And then to transcend beyond that, you know, to not making that the goal. Because again, that's just how we've been trained. That's just how we've been trained. That now let's get better at that. That now sex will fix our relationship. Right. You know? Right. Generally.
And if you have sex this many times, or if you, you know, have sex this way, and I think that's even where it shifts back to intimacy is, can you be intimate with somebody without there having to be a goal or an outcome with it? Like with sex, like, to me, it's way more connecting if you're like, I'm not having an orgasm. I'm really enjoying being with you. My body is not in that space right now. And I'm going to name that instead of pretending or, you know, going until it is painful to try to make it happen. And it's just that, like, that freedom to be like, not everything has to have an end goal that is some sort of output, literally and figuratively. I'm curious, Dr. Catalina, as we wrap up, again, imagining all these people whose brains are now already sort of burnt out. They're overflowing with all these different invitations, some of that curiosity, probably some of that resistance, that protective piece coming in. And they're like, okay, what do I do now? What would you say is just sort of the one next step, or the one sort of place to start to move forward for them right now?
Yeah. The number one thing, everything, and with any behavior, but particularly towards change, is heightening your awareness. So I teach people acknowledge, empathize, assert. And the first thing is just heightening your awareness. A curiosity comes within that, but literally beginning to explore how it's going to start off with, like, you mentalating, I don't know if that's the word, mentalizing.
I like it.
Like, it's like titillating. Like noticing the thoughts, but then coming as quickly as you can and learning how to notice the sensations, to begin to give space to what your body is experiencing. And this is the interoception, you know, and I encourage people to really just begin to close their eyes, not while driving, but like really actually, and if we just do this for a moment, we know that, like, you're generally only 2 to 3 breaths away, but even just beginning to heighten our awareness of what is happening, that in and of itself is an intervention across every single behavior, right? But particularly for this, it's actually giving our body just a chance for us to check in.
Yeah. And I even think about that just in relation to when I used to do that. Me now still has days where I can't in that way. And the skill has gotten better. What used to happen is every time I would go to do that sort of like turn inward, I would do more writing and just like brain dump what's going on. And what I would find is that I would immediately jump into fix it, solve it, or avoid it mode of like, how do I fix this? How do I make this better? I've jumped 10 stones over here and I'm trying to solve this thing that isn't even a problem, but I've labeled it as a problem because, again, of the perception in the story. And so as people are starting this, if you're like, ooh, I tried that and then this happened and now I was down this other rabbit hole feeling like shit about everything I'm not doing right, that's also data. That's the insight building too.
And this is how we actually continue to expand.
I love it.
And I think that, I'll be honest, like trained as working in cancer and in hospitals, like with brief psychotherapy, like now the beauty of being in private practice, and again, knowing it's a privilege for people who come to see me, that I'm playing the long game, man. Like we're going to watch your life evolve, like, and when people come to me for low sexual desire or pain, and generally for, like I said, for most people, it's years that they haven't. I'm like, well, that shit happened started before this relationship. You really want to get to it? You want your life to be different? Let's go. And know that your body now needs the consistency, predictability, and control. It needs so many of those things to actually feel safe enough to long-term change. Live, like, connect to yourself and your sexuality in life, in your day-to-day life. It is not just when you are in the bedroom. It is not just when you go to yoga. It's not that. All of that's beautiful. All of those are beautiful practices.
Right.
It is in how you walk, how you get to work. It's in those frustrations. It's in the kindness that you give to yourself. And that's where that practice keeps coming. And the more we practice it, because again, for all of the sexual concerns most people present with, the work starts outside of the bedroom. If you haven't had sex in a long time, well, then you're not going to miss it anyways already. Like we're not going there. Like that's one of the hardest things for when people come. I'm like, well, it's just off the table now. And what do they experience? Immediate relief. Yeah. We just know now. That all of the doing, I mean, in CBT work comes later. The body is first. And that's where we start. And that's the beautiful part I think about. I also love framing all of that within thinking about our sexual energy and how we
love this.
Ourselves.
I love this. I also love how you just retied it back together in a bow, because I feel like every time we'd start to tie it, I'm like, well, let me reopen. Add another layer. Okay. I think this is so powerful for everyone. Again, take what you can today. Coming back to that again, she's asking for 10 breaths. That's it. It's easy to talk yourself out of it.
And I'm asking for 10 breaths like throughout the day.
Like throughout the day. Let's just start with 2 or 3.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
It.
Just start there. Touch is our most efficient regulator. Put it on your chest is where you're going to feel it, and just check in.
I love it.
How that feels.
I love it. Once you've done that, if you're like, okay, I want to keep going with this, I'm ready to take more on, I'm going to have links to all of Dr. Catalina's spaces and places where she's putting out information so you can connect with her if you're wanting to work with her, get on her email list, follow her on TikTok. She's got such powerful things that she's putting out in the world. And again, really trying to help each person that she's around and continue to support herself in that chase for curiosity, that openness, that expansion. And so Dr. Catalina, thank you. This has been amazing. I'm so excited to put this out in the world for other people. And Thanks for listeners, we will see you again next Sunday.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.